Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Naomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. So welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. Today, I'm joined by Karl Moyse. Now, Karl is a UK-born creative professional with over 23 years of experience in design and digital marketing. And Karl has worked across all aspects of the industry with a focus on design, project management, and digital marketing. He's been part of an award-winning team at Jacob Bailey in the UK and has had 2 websites shortlisted for the Australian Web Awards after moving to Australia. Karl is passionate about design and sees it as a way of life reflected in his hobbies and spirituality. And he is also a keynote speaker covering topics such as data, technology, and creativity. So thank you for joining me today, Karl. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, Naomi.
Oh, it's really great to have great guests, and especially people I've connected with previously, because it just makes this so fluid. And hopefully everyone's loving hearing us having a chat today and going
Fingers
through.
crossed.
Yeah, that's right. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Cool. All right. So I turned 43 this year. I'm from the UK originally. We've moved back and forward to WA when I was a kid, and I moved back to WA in October 2007. Had a bit of a journey through life, went through a marriage breakdown during the GFC, and had to do that very much on my own with no friends or family. And when you kind of go through that level of turbulence, you inevitably come out the other side very much a different person. I do embrace design thinking and creativity in a lot of what I do as an individual. Design for me is almost a bit of a philosophy. It's it's very much understanding people and relationships and communication and looking at where design can come in and problem solve and create better outcomes, improve efficiency. So even at home in the relatively small house we've got, we're kind of redesigning our home to be as efficient in terms of space and that as possible. But I think out of that sort of marriage breakdown I've referenced beforehand, that kind of really kickstarted a level of spirituality for me. It's hard to sometimes put into words because it's not like here is a belief system that exists in a book or an existing religion, but it's more of an understanding of like how the world works, how it's connected me to various events and certain things. And like when we step out of the pain we find ourselves in at time and just kind of step back and look at the world and how everything kind of works as it's meant to work, it can become a very inspiring way of thinking. And that just has a real knock-on effect to a lot of the areas of my life as well.
Yeah, and that's interesting because one of the questions I like to ask is about, what's the biggest obstacle you've had to overcome and how did that strengthen your connection inward? So you've kind of answered that a little bit, but could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Oh, absolutely. Like I think like when that occurred in my life, I would have been 28, nearly 29. As I mentioned before, I turned 43 in February. So a few years down the track and a few more grey hairs for good measure. Like for me, when I went through that process, it was very much like an isolated, lonely process. And like I'd realized the reasons for wanting to stay in that marriage were not necessarily the right reasons at that time. It was looking at my mum's side of the family where there'd been no marriage breakdowns for maybe any generations and feeling the burden of, oh my God, I'm the first person there to maybe go on that journey. So you feel like that ancestral burden and that sort of expectation, you've got to keep up appearances for people and those kind of things. Yep. So it's like, was that the right reason to try and stay and work for that marriage? Absolutely not. And that's with absolute love and respect to my ex-wife in that space as well. But like for me, having to look hard at myself and my life and my role and responsibility in all things was very much that spiritual turning point, for want of a better term. I mean, since then I've remarried. I've got two amazing girls now. Me and my wife, what we'd call ourselves like a very tight team. We work really well together at home. COVID has given everyone challenges, and we've been no exception. In 2020, it was kind of her turn for the challenge. Excuse me. And in 2021, it was kind of my turn for the challenge. And mine was very business focused, whereas my wife was sort of personally focused. But having gone through those prior challenges and coming out the other end, you kind of go, you know, I've got through all this shit, excuse my language, previously in my life. I've got out of those dark areas and got through some pretty sticky situations. So that ability to have faith in your own ability to overcome, and to be real about when you need help and support as well. And although I'd been in business for a number of years, suddenly find myself as the face of the business and having to sort of pick up the business during like a stressful time due to COVID and other things that were going on. Like, there was a lot of overwhelm for me. I was working a lot of hours. It was a very exhausting time. But like, I'm very blessed and privileged and grateful that I have an amazing wife who could kind of like steady the ship at home while I was able to sort of steady the ship in the business. And like this year, we've kind of like, all right, we've overcome that high stress situation. We're looking forward. Everything's in a much better position. So it's like, cool, let's recalibrate, reset where we're at today, and start to sort of elevate the thinking and the goals and what we're doing out in life, and supporting each other on the journey as well. So that's kind of been a big part of where we're at and where we're going. And like, for us as a married couple, there's big support with each other. We really drive each other to go and pursue the goals we want to do. But we've got no family nearby. My wife's family's on the East Coast. Mine's all back in the UK. So you have to try and balance and make a plan and be flexible and fluid. And I think what COVID has maybe shown us is that all the rules of engagement we had before COVID has just been blown out the water. So we're in a new paradigm, and we're sort of still settling the rules of what this paradigm means. And I think there's an opportunity for all of us to kind of co-create a new reality based on this, you know, collective trauma that we've been through. That I kind of have used that term a few times, because it is a bit of a traumatic experience, and we've all experienced different levels of the trauma, whether it be personal, business, financial for a lot of people as well. But really, like, overcoming that and finding strength in what we've achieved and who we are today. And rather than being sort of caught in the past or the pain from the past, let's start moving forward, and where we go and who can we sort of drag along with us to have a lot of fun in the process as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, you know, time of starting a podcast, I suppose, and coming into this is post-COVID, but talking about leadership, everyone has a COVID story so far that they've talked about. And in your industry, it kind of would have been a little bit different than most, I would imagine. But what has COVID amplified in your opinion?
I mean, in business, I think it's amplified weakness in businesses, whether that be weakness in supply chain that's been very well documented by the media, or maybe weakness within internal systems, personnel, the agreements you have within business, the people you work with. Like, if there's a weakness that maybe wasn't known fully beforehand, or we'll address that later on. If it was unaddressed, then COVID was like, right, here it is in your face. And I think for business owners, like, unless you, like, employees wouldn't get this, and I mean this with the greatest respect to employees. I've been one myself for a number of years. When you're the business owner, you carry the risk. And when that business, you know, you're not a business owner from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. It is 365 days a year, and it's 24 hours a day. And I think from a business owner, like, they've risk to security, knowing that if the business fails, there's a high chance of losing your house if your house is tied to the business in any way, shape, or form. Like, that's a level of fear that, unless you've experienced it, it's hard to describe. And at a time during COVID when there's been a homelessness crisis, there is now a cost of living crisis, you know, you don't want to be someone who's losing your home right now, because there's not enough support for those people out there. So that was a bit of a stress factor I had to face in 2021, is having to sort of navigate some tricky situations. And like I said, I'm very grateful I had my wife at home who could carry my ass while I was sort of focused elsewhere in the short term to make that happen.
And it's, you know, with COVID as well, and I don't want to harp on about it because we want to come out the other side shining, obviously. That's where I'm
Yes.
looking at the future. But there was a lot of changes technologically, right? There was, you know, Zoom stepped up and there was heaps more capacity with that. And there's other bits and pieces that have come through. And I think AI is probably a new one that's come through now that people are relying on more than ever as well. What do you think from your sort of tech background and your tech knowledge? What's the likely impact versus what we've been promised in regards to AI?
Oh, that's a big question. AI. AI, like my view of AI, and this is also a view of humans, it's just that the ability of AI to do it is far faster than we can. So if we look at human beings, I believe, well, I believe this is fact, is all knowledge we have is built upon the knowledge that comes before.
Yeah.
And, you know, collectively, there is a broad body of knowledge across human culture, human race, human religions, human spirituality. But that's taken humanity, like all known and unknown civilization, to acquire that knowledge, to pass it on through storytelling, you know, through ancestral lines and everything else.
Mm.
AI, in my opinion, very much builds its information in the same way, but the speed at which it can do it is way faster than we can necessarily comprehend. Now, the risk is, and this is, I believe it's a real risk, is our political leaders across the world at all different levels are so far behind what's really happening that they're arguing about things that really are not relevant where AI is concerned. And I
Mm.
do believe there will be massive disruption within our economy in the next 5 to 10 years. We're already starting to see it, especially in the creative space,
Mm.
whereby, like if we take copywriters, for example, you know, people who have made money from being able to put words together really well and articulate good storytelling in that space. You know, if you're a small business and you can jump on GPT to, excuse me, get a decent bit of text going, it's far quicker and cheaper than it is to go to a copywriter. So
Yeah.
any business owner is going to go, this is more efficient. This is saving me money. This gets me instant results.
Yeah, as I
So,
say,
but
get
for
it
all
now, right? That instant
absolutely,
gratification. Yeah.
yeah. But for all the copywriters who have dedicated their careers and maybe their study, there may be HEC stats there to you know really try and get into that craft. What are we going to do for those people right now if all of a sudden they are effectively going to be potentially redundant in the next 5 to 10 years? And it's
Mm.
not to say that all copywriters will be redundant, but if we say this is the group of copywriters, we might find that this is the only ones that survive. You've
Mm.
got to be like the best of the best to compete with what AI can do.
Mm.
As I mentioned before, what AI does is its language models are based upon what exists in the world currently. So it kind of scans that, and it is an amazing library of accessible language and other information that it can build upon. So I think similar to the copywriters, people who necessarily aren't following trends but are looking for the undiscovered territory, they will be the ones that will probably continue to maintain an income from their industry where AI
Mm.
will essentially destroy a lot of people. I said at the start of the year at one of my BNI chapter meetings, you know, in the next 5 years, expect this to happen. And I was talking about my own industry with web design, and already since then, we're seeing AI appearing to compete with like the work that I do.
Mm.
So for me, who spent 23 years in this space and is like would consider my knowledge of my craft broader and quite detailed, there is a very real threat to my potential income in the next few years as well.
Yeah.
Is the pressure and the burden of retraining going to fall on my shoulders, or is there society at large going to be funding those things? Like these are the questions I think we need to be having about AI is what do we do for the people who suddenly find the skills and the careers they've got redundant? And I
Yeah.
think we've maybe seen this at times in history prior where technological revolution, industrial revolution just made certain jobs redundant. But often the burden to then retrain falls on the individual. And I think with the work you would know, like if you've come out of a situation where you've lost a job, you've lost your income streams, your mental capacity to lift yourself up and then go and retrain and start a new career is often very diminished. And I think that's the kind of thing we're not addressing with respect to AI and the risk to the broader economy right now.
And the
Put in
community as well, you know, I
absolutely.
I've actually thought about it in the line of work that I do. I mean, they have been modeling AI for therapy purposes, right? So you can go and do that. I also am delivering online courses. And I've seen videos you can get content and put it in, and AI will not only get the content for you, it will make the video for you as well. So people can just put together a course and sell it, which is obviously sort of devaluing some of the work that I do.
Yep.
But and then there's some bonuses as well. So I do the online course, I do have the hosting platform. They've gone in and they've programmed the AI with my content. So now when people ask questions about in the course and about the course, it actually spits out responses coming from the course.
Fantastic.
So coming from the,
yeah.
So there is some things that I can see are beneficial, but you're
Absolutely.
right. We're not doing probably enough planning and researching and contingency thinking and strategy around it, for what it's going to do to the community.
Absolutely.
Business world. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if we expand that point, if you look at like big corporations, not to put them in the bad box by any means, but like if we look at where tech has driven things, especially from a corporate level, through the history of technological innovation, what it's resulted in is greater profits for those organizations and less staff earn an income. So if we look at the broader economy and go, okay, well, if a greater percentage of this is going to go to a smaller number of people, then there is less money to go around for the rest of the circulating economy. So, where do we start taxing people moving forward? Like, we need a different conversation around taxation. If machines are going to come in and essentially take on a lot of and really we've spoken, like AI has been talked about as, it will pick up the small grudgy kind of work no one wants to do. But when we're talking about like AI spitting out hardcore web developing code, doing away with web designers, creatives, artists, copywriters, like these are skilled careers.
Yeah.
Like that. It's not what we call grudging labor. It's a highly sought after skill set. So it's a different conversation we need to apply to that. But on the flip side, as I said at the start, like the way that it accumulates knowledge relative to human beings, the speed of which it can be done, like really, who knows where we're going to go? Like there is so much potential to redefine society and civilization, providing we have the right checks and balances in place where AI is concerned. Like who knows what kind of potential utopia we could be moving toward. But knowing how flawed humans are, there's always that risk of like, well, we've got a bit of a crazy dictator in one country that's got a bit of a unique AI that just, somehow breaches every kind of firewall that exists, penetrates their systems. And then before we know it, we've got a Terminator 2 Judgment Day situation on our hands as well. So I'm excited by the concept. I'm fascinated by the idea that if we take a Christian religious approach, is that there's a God that created man, and maybe in a modern sense, we've kind of like got rid of God to a degree. We've created AI. Is AI going to do away with man? Like they're sort of philosophical concepts we need to maybe question. And again, like who does it benefit? And I think, like the change of technological pace, if we look historically for the last 200 years, it's kind of been like that. And in the last 100 years, it's kind of done that. And I think what we think we are here right now, we're actually up here somewhere else altogether. But this is just what's commercially available to the public. What's unknown is a little bit concerning because we don't know what we don't know. And just the pace of which, I think I saw a thing the other day that said, since the start of the year, there's been 1,600 AI businesses released in that time. Like that's going from maybe like a handful to that number in a very short period of time. We could probably say by the end of the year, we're in the millions of AI businesses that exist out there as well. It's an interesting concept. It's not something I know the answers to. I believe tech can be an enabler. The fact that we're having this conversation right now is evidence of that. And I think that's what we have to lead with. If we just allow this thing to do its own thing without giving it some kind of focus, whether it be ethics or an understanding of history, especially if we look at the way misinformation can be portrayed online and how tech can easily take my voice. In fact, my business partner, Adrian, he's done a lot of really good stuff. I'll put a little shout out to him, Adrian Twarog, Twarog. Give that guy a YouTube. I think he's done a few AI videos, very much around our industry. But he shot me a video the other day where I was chatting to him online and I started listening to the video and I was like, that's his voice. but basically his voice was reading out everything I just typed to him.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a little bit freaky because my type speak is exactly like how he talks. So for a moment, I was very confused. But that's tech that's generally applicable or available to a lot of people right now. So the idea, I mean, we could even step into the realm of future evidence from a legal point of view. If it's easy for me to deep fake myself or my voice or whatever, I could easily create evidence that suggests I'm not in a particular place where, if I was in that place, well, I would be guilty by association. So it's a bizarre time to exist. We've only got to reflect on the Donald Trump issue and the fake news in the US and the awareness of fake news. Putting aside feelings to him, fake news exists. It's easy to create. Language is power. And if we've got powerful machines that know the best words to use to manipulate the mindsets of the masses, that's a big tool with a lot of responsibility that exists out in the world. And again, if they're nefarious players that have access to these tools, we need to ensure we've got the right legislation, the right protections in place to protect everybody, our critical infrastructure and systems that are so dependent upon tech infrastructure nowadays as well. It's a beast of a conversation. And my concern is we're talking about it this much and we're missing this whole picture of what it really means on a deeper, broader level at the same time.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've, and there's some really interesting points, and I think, we need to get there from a legislative perspective to look at it bigger. But one of the things I get is, it's learning from the content that's there, right?
Yes.
So what happens when everyone starts just pulling from content that's available and they stop creating new content? So I'm all about learning and growth and evolution, and that's how we evolve. Hey, we like do a new experiment, or we try this, and we go, hey, I've just found this out, or this theory really works for me. And if we stop doing that because we're relying on the AI, then we stop reaching things that were in our potential before that then just disappear.
Absolutely. It's I think if we look at society, we've generally diminished the arts and the creators. We've focused very heavily on the job creators or like big financial, especially like London and Europe, where like the banking system is quite large, maybe predatory. But it's always the creators that essentially initiate change. It's what's taking what was formed before and looking at this and going, we can do this better and we can improve upon this. And I think you've made a real valid point. If we're just fishing from the same pool, sure, we're going to get unique variations of the fish that exists, but we're still limited to the fish that exists to start with. I remember talking to someone a while ago. This is more of a spirituality concept, but it was on the basis of like, if I've only experienced the color blue, I will only ever paint with the color blue. But if I suddenly experience the color red, then I've got the ability to paint in blue, in red, and infinite shades of purple. And it takes a creator who has still experienced that stuff, but suddenly it's a mindset shift that you go on as a creator. It's you inevitably when I start a new web design, I in my own library in my head are sort of pulling on references for my whole body of work across my career, even though I'm creating something new. If we think of the car has evolved from rolling big stone slabs down logs, versus trying to pick big stone slabs up and move them by hand. So we're looking on this path of efficiency and that technological shift. And we're just at a unique tipping point right now. I don't like it's exciting. It's horrifically scary at the same time. Humankind has never reached, or at least known humankind in terms of what's recorded human history. We're in uncharted territory right now. And it's an opportunity, but it could also become a very big problem at the same time.
Yeah, and I think, with things like this coming as well, and with tech, I rely on a fair bit of tech to do what I do. I run a business that's partially online and partially in person. So there's a lot I rely on, but there's things that I need to remember, and that's just that personability, right? And even if I am online, making sure I'm still authentically me and it still comes out. And when we have challenges, if we don't have that personability and we don't have that ability to build relationships and bounce off each other, then it's going to create some issues for us. And I find that the challenges that we do have, if we can look back at them and we've got the right support, we tend to have a lot of gratitude for them, right? because they've got some gold nuggets in there.
100%.
So do you have any challenges in your life that you could share that you sort of later on when you looked at it, you were like, oh, that was actually pretty handy that went down, we had some gratitude for?
I think it's almost everything. Like there's the pain you're in at the time, and when you're in the pain and it's dark, all you feel is pain, all you see is darkness. And when you come out of that space, which we all will, if we commit to that and we align the mindset with that, we can reflect and go like, you know what, like maybe I was a bit of a dick beforehand, excuse the language, but I think it's a good term to use. And that was definitely me in a younger part of my life. And it's easy to externalize blame when you're in the pain. You go, it's this fault, it's that fault, blah, blah, blah. But then you sort of get past, you get bored of your own narratives and you start looking and go, okay, cool. Well, what was my role in all things? What can I take and really take responsibility for everything that's in your life is kind of a philosophy I've started to embrace more and more as I've gotten older. There's a lot of things that were not my fault, but I was maybe played a role in not saying things sooner or not getting out of situations or enabling behavior that should have been pulled up. And it's really a case of like, what can you take out of this for yourself from these moments here? And if there's a message I want to share with anyone listening, it's just have faith in yourself, have trust in yourself, get your ego in check, because your ego will want to take you on some unique stories and narratives and it's everyone else's fault but mine. And it's just a case of like, understand the role the ego wants to play in your life and know that it is a storyteller and it's trying to preserve its own identity at the same time. It likes to cling to pleasure or pain, but it's like we can't get too attached to either of those because our job is to navigate between these as we experience them in life. So it's just to get real with yourself and go like, if I can improve myself from this, then that's the responsibility on my shoulders to do. And if you can do that, you just come out of it far richer.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Naomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Naomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgroconsulting.com.au.
And for me and my experience in life, like after a pretty exhausting, I turned 40 in February 2020, like at the end of February, a week later, COVID hit. It's almost been a shit show for about 2 years afterwards. But now that we're sort of like coming into this calmer phase, this post-COVID phase, as I think we're starting to talk about it, it's really a case of like, look at where we're at today. Like we have survived a collective traumatic experience. And if we have survived it as a business, we've generally come through it with a much stronger, more resilient business. We've come through it with more focus and determination. And I think there's a sense of a positive tribal mindset that's kind of awakening in the conversations I'm having with people. And human beings, we come from tribes. We come from ancient tribes where we weren't all equal, but we were all equally valued in what we brought to the tribe. And I know for my business, like we've sort of shrunk down the last couple of years. And in a conversation I had, or in a little presentation I did a couple of weeks ago, I spoke about my business today as a deconstructed agency model. Is the typical creative agency would be you'd have everyone under one roof and they're all following the same hymn sheet, for want of a better term. But I feel like having worked in those organizations, you kind of see how much creativity can be like reduced because you're trying to, keep people happy up the chain. So I'd rather be in a situation where, you know what, I've got a specific project. Here's a fantastic videographer. Let's bring him in here. Here's an amazing photographer. Let's bring them in here as well. Here's an amazing person like yourself. Let's come in and work with internal organization on mindset and different things first before we can come and pick our work up and then take that to a higher level. So rather than that maybe pre-COVID competitive scarcity mindset of I want to have all my stuff to me, it's like, do you know what? Like we've been through some crap. What's really real important in life, which is the connections, the moments, the experiences we have, embrace that. And we're trying to sort of build a business model that supports that and is in alignment with that. And we just want to work with really cool people that I know they're craftsmen in their own, and women in their own right. They take pride in what they do. They work to a high standard. I don't want to tell them what to do. I want them to come and work with me and tell me what I need to do to get more out of them from there as well. And I just see that kind of model as more sustainable, maybe better in terms of the equity we would all get from a project. So rather than like the agency taking the lion's share and the staff getting like crumbs from here, it's like, well, if there's this big pot of money, let's divvy that up between the professionals. Let's do amazing work. Let's build great relationships. And we all win from such a model. And we're all going to be richer in life and creatively as a result of that as well.
And look, I love that, because I am all about community, as you know, and that was part of why I wanted to put together a podcast in the first place, right? Is I feel like I've been blessed, or I've worked hard, I suppose, at building some strong relationships that then have filtered out into other connections and other connections. And there's so much that I can't bring it all to the world, right? So, but if I can bring all these other people and connect them, I don't know if you've read the book. Have you read the book Go Giver? The Go Giver? Okay, so The Go Giver it's a story, it's a parable, I suppose you can say. It's a story, but it has a hidden line in it. And one of the elements of the Go Giver, and they've got all different elements that make up a society, right, of giving. One of them is the connector. And I read this book and I looked at it, I went, oh, that's me. And I just feel like, although I do have a service to provide and I feel like I give, that quality to people, I feel like one of my inner superpowers is the ability to connect others. And that's one of the things that I've then started pursuing a little bit more out of, in our post-COVID space is, okay, well, how can I connect this person and this person, and they can have a great relationship, and someone, oh, you need one of those? I know one of those, and bringing them forward and recommending, and knowing that the people around me are then served by that high quality of those additional people around me.
100%, sister. Like you're talking my language in a different but very similar way, stepping into this year, like with a different mindset and sort of overcoming the fatigue and the exhaustion from the last couple of years. Like I found myself doing exactly that as well. It's like, who do I know that can benefit this person? We're both involved, I think, in different BNI chapters, and it's a big part of what they talk about in BNI, that givers gain, that building relationships and trust. And like right now in Bunbury, they're launching the Creative Tech Village under the City of Bunbury Library. I was only there yesterday with Ben Yu, the photographer. Do you know Ben? Talking with Matt Lewis, who is hired from ECU, the Edith Cowan University, to try and drive that space. And we had a great chat with Matt yesterday, and like we sort of all were in alignment with, like, it's all well and good expecting someone to create something that you can benefit from, but it's like we've got to meet people halfway. Like, the universe isn't going to do it for you. The universe will reward you if you step up to the plate and take action and take some ownership in that as well. And like for me, there comes a point, like 43, I'm not old, I'm not young, I'm in that in-between phase of business life, so to speak. And you realize I didn't get where I got to on my own. There are people that helped you along the way. And it's like, if I can use my position in business and connections through the Chamber of Commerce, through BNI, through other groups like BSW Connect in the Southwest as well, whatever we can do to connect people, to share in a broader story and a broader narrative, like it's a community service, it's a community good. It's something we should all be taking ownership of, because if we want a better economy, if we want better possibilities for the future, like we can't just sit there and moan about things. We've got to step up and actively engage in our world, politically, economically, in business, and in conversation as well.
And you look at this messaging has been given to us throughout history, and not to be specific with religion or anything element like that, but I need to use it to explain it. But we looked at Jesus and his messaging around do unto others as you would like done unto you, right? And that oneness story. And then you even look at the Buddha and him speaking about the law of karma and how what you give out is what you get back as a law. So and there's many more. I could sit here probably for an hour and go through them all, but these messages have come through history, and I feel like we're only now just awakening to it, to go, oh, there's something in this. It's not just about, oh, I'd be kind to the people I like. This is about what I actually contribute to this community, is how I live from this inner world. This is what it gives back to me in a deeper space.
100%. There was like when I was pretty much in a bit of a low dark ebb in the middle of 2021, when I was struggling a bit, a local business owner who's a friend of mine, he sort of got me around to his house, and I would say he kind of scraped me up off the floor at the time. And he's a Christian. He believes in in the Bible and different things. And he just randomly, he said, I want to give you a challenge, Karl. I want to lend you my Bible for a bit. And I want you just to read at it and just see what your takeaway was. But he opened it up to Proverbs in the Bible. And it's like my biblical knowledge is nowhere near what I would like it to be. Like I've kind of like, life's a buffet, let me eat everything at the buffet.
Yeah.
But he opened it to Proverbs and it was called Wisdom. And he got me to read out like that page to him. And it spoke about living in alignment with God, but like in doing so with goodness in your heart. And if you do that and you lead with that level of intent, good things will happen for you. And again, it's not necessarily to get too caught up in it's the truth, it's this God or whatever, but like there's a strong message there. And like if we sort of take a step out of the religions and we look at the language they use and we compare the language they had available then to the language we have available now, and our ability, like we have more language, more context, greater description and understanding of things and even our modern world. But like we're talking about people who are living in primitive times to a degree, who are trying to articulate maybe the experiences they are feeling or seeing or are happening. And you, like as we would, if we experience something we have never seen or experienced before, through pattern recognition, we would try and label that thing so that it fits in with understanding of the world as we know it. So it's like if we step out of the judgment of religions and we just look at them as like they're trying to communicate a message, and they're doing so through limitations of the time, the location, the geography, the biases, and the language they've got available. Like, what is the real message behind the message? Is it that there's a big, angry, wrathful God here that's going to smite you because of whatever? Or is it, like you said, like, you know, the simple teaching of, you know, treat people as you wish to be treated, the laws of karma? And if we sort of remove the glitz and the glamour and just go, what is the true message here? Maybe there's something pretty divine in those messages that is applicable across all religious spiritual thoughts and non-religious spiritual thoughts as well. I'm going to just go a little bit further, and I hope you can indulge me on this one here.
Okay, all right, interesting. Yeah.
It's like, if we were, I think Gary Vaynerchuk talks about our possibility of existence is 400 trillion to 1. And they're pretty big odds. And I would just be like, I think you're pretty low on those odds there. So he talks about 400 trillion to 1 odds of existing right now. And I just go, are those odds too low? And like, if we talk about existence, it's all known existence versus all unknown existence. It's all possibility of existence at any time in history, and history that's yet to, or the future that hasn't been written yet. And when you sort of start breaking the maths down, I think it's impossible to calculate. It's almost infinitely impossible. So the mathematical possibility of me existing is so infinitely small that the only other way to describe our existence at all is to frame it as being a miracle. And when you kind of then sort of step back and go, okay, my existence is quite miraculous, there's something divinely inspiring from that deep understanding. And when I look at how my life has mapped out and how certain people at certain times along the way have, like I said, I went for a marriage breakdown in 2008, 2009 with my ex-wife. My ex-wife was very powerful in bringing me back to Australia. So like she played her role in bringing me here. And then I was stuck for a period of time because of the GFC and financial stress where I lived before. But I was stuck long enough that I then met my current wife. And if I hadn't been in that location at that time, that moment wouldn't have occurred. So you tend to sort of go, okay, well, like my current wife, like she got to WA at the time she was meant to be here. And there are people in her life that would have influenced when she landed. And you kind of step back and realize, like, how much of this right now am I responsible for? And you go, very little. And you realize everybody are actors on the great stage of life, supporting each other, driving each other, challenging each other to get to certain places at certain times to make things happen. And that kind of is like, that's the magic right there. That's the mystical experience, for want of a better term. And I think if we see that magic for what it is, that becomes a very inspiring way to live. And I think when that becomes part of who you intrinsically are, and I think that's who you are, and that's the crazy that I am as well. But the way we interact, the way we engage, the way we intentionally live our life is so very different. And it's like we spoke before about that authenticity in how we do things. And I believe when we're empowered in that space, as my wife walking behind me right now, that is the power we bring. And that's a message that when we share that message, you can see it sparking people up at the same time. And like we can be an influencer online, like my business partner, Adrian, I mentioned before, he's got a following of 500,000 people globally across a couple of different YouTube channels. But we influence in everything that we do in every given moment. Like the conversation you and I are having right now, we will inevitably influence each other. And as this message is shared to a broader audience, it's going to have the same impact for people who see the message as well.
Yeah, and that does really resonate with me, as you know. And this is one of the messages that I sprinkle in. So I have the leadership psychology program, right? But it's sprinkled through with gnomes. That's kind of how I explain it. And it's one of the main messages I try and get across, that as a leader, it's our responsibility to serve everyone around us, and not holding back from a courageous conversation or a constructive conversation, you know, because that can serve that person. It's about putting our own inadequacies and our own feelings aside to how we can better grow the people around us. And, you know, when we focus more on that, we are more courageous and we do take more risks and there is more reward. And I think that in itself is the key to leadership, and not just because that makes you a good leader and everyone goes, oh, you know, and bows down to you, but I feel like it's part of our moral obligation is to help support each other. And then we're gifted this role of a leadership role. We can't let it waste away, right?
100%. I talk to people and I'll laugh and joke. So like there's the paid work, which I do in the business, which obviously affords us a home, food on the table, opportunities to travel and experience great things with my family. Then there's the unpaid work, as I call it, which is what I call the spiritual work. And again, it's not tied to a religion. I don't have a fixed religious belief. And I don't even like using that label spiritual because there are ideas that exist out there, but it's the best. Yeah, it's the best I can describe right now. But that sense of the spiritual work, and again, it's reflected on my life when it's been dark, when it's been painful, when there's been deep challenges you've had to overcome. When you overcome that and you're like, oh man, I'm on the other side now, cool. You tend to recognize subtle signs in people when they're going through that themselves. And I think it takes nothing to just reach out an arm to pull someone up, to have a conversation with someone and just create a safe, sacred space for them. And I think, you know, we're kind of bombarded about not failing in life, in society, whether it be through education, through parents, through other things in life. It's like failure is this big nasty thing that we've got to avoid at all costs. But in not failing, we don't grow and we become very stagnant in that space. And I think if there was a lesson for everyone to embrace, they talk about it in Silicon Valley tech startup: fail quickly, fail small, pivot into a new direction. And the pivot is essentially the lesson learned from the failure is moving you into a new direction with new energy to create new opportunity from there. And I think if everyone embraced the idea of failure in a decent way, not in a high risk way, but in like, I'm going to fail, and that's an inevitability in life. But let's embrace what failure really means, because failure equates to growth. And if we're growing and we're learning, then we're not going to repeat the same mistake more than 2 times. We're going to move into a better direction, and we're going to have a much richer experience as a result of that as well.
Yeah, and an example of this came up yesterday for me, because I actually, Carol Dweck's book Mindset, right? I read that and I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this mindset. So not with everything, but it really made me question, because I didn't see failure as an opportunity for learning, right? If I failed, there's all these reasons why it failed. I would never take ownership of it. I would never and it held me back. And especially coming into this world of being an entrepreneur, that's what life's about, is just falling on your face every 5 minutes, right?
Pretty much.
And getting up and loving it. You have to just love it. And I was having lunch with someone yesterday. It was a family member, and we've always razzed each other up in our family. And I did something and I made a mistake, and they're like, oh, are you saying sorry? Because I kind of said sorry. And I went, yeah, because I made a mistake. That's how I roll. And I just owned it. And they were like, oh, and they didn't know what to do. But, you know, that's how I was even brought up. So my origin stories are all about, you're going to get jazzed up if you make a mistake. Don't make a mistake. It's embarrassing, you know. So it's a big generational thing that I think a few people are having to break, is to go in there and go, it's okay to scrape my knee. I've got Band-Aids, right? It's okay.
Absolutely. I've got a nearly 9-year-old and a 7.5-year-old, very high energy, active kids. And we've got a monkey bar set at the back garden here. We've got a big trampoline. there is risk to both of those bits of equipment, risk of injury, risk of death at the high end. But it's like, if I wrap my kids in cotton wool, how are they going to deal with their first failure as an adult in life? And again, I'll reference a conversation with my mum that I don't think she'll mind me sharing, is that when I went through that marriage breakdown with my ex-wife years ago, like, she said she felt a lot of guilt around that, which as a parent, like, we're so tied to our kids, it's almost hard to differentiate. But I remember saying to my mum at the time, I was like, Mum, if I don't go through my own crap in life, how on earth am I ever going to be strong enough to deal with what life is going to throw at me? Yeah. And I still believe in that more now than ever. Like, it's the pain, it's the darkness, it's the turbulence, it's the challenges you overcome that define who you. It doesn't, like, you still have to go on the journey, and you have to overcome that, and you have to step up at the end and say, okay, we've overcome, we're victorious, we're moving forward. But you're forever changed from those experiences. And if we don't embrace that in our lives and encourage others to do that, then we're only going to sit at a certain level. And to bring it back to a little bit of technology and the internet to a degree as well, and messaging, like, if we look at narratives through history, like if we go like to World War II, like the Germans are the bad guys, the British are the good guys, the Russians are the Russians. We back then we were kind of force-fed messaging, which is, dig for victory in the UK, like, your country needs you now. Very nationalistic, passionate messaging to galvanize the people, and needed at a really tough time. But obviously, it's a one-way message. It's the power bodies sending the message to the people. Whereas we look at today with the internet, like, sure, there's a dark part of the internet. I don't think we'll cover that today, but very much the internet is a push-pull communication mechanism that we can receive information and then push back and challenge the narrative or engage in a deeper way. We suddenly start to look at, well, are the narratives we've been fed over a period of time, how real are they? How much is fabricated? And how much commonality do we all share? And like, if we look at the world right now, there is obviously tensions in Ukraine and Russia. I'm not knowledgeable enough to comment on the ins and outs of that. But if we remove the country labels, there are people going to war in both of those respective countries right now, believing they're doing the right thing for both of their countries. And the internet is a way of just going like, well, we're all people, and most people want security, opportunity, safety, a safe home, food and water, and maybe just good experiences thereafter. So if we're all sharing this commonality, we all have, majority of has two lungs, we all have a heart, we've got a brain, we've got limbs, we may have different shades of skin tone, but we probably share 99% commonality, but we get caught up on the small percentages, the differences that exist between us. And communication in the modern age gives us an opportunity to challenge those ideas. And we are building more of a global population, but we should still be we should be celebrating the differences in culture, in language, in song, in food, and seeing it as like, wow, this is how you celebrate your belief in your version of God. This is how I do it. This is how you do it. And how bizarre and diverse this celebration is, but how rich that we can share in this collective experience that's grounded in history and location and food and race, as opposed to going, well, my God's right, your God is wrong. Like, it's such a low level argument. And the tools are there today to facilitate better communication. It needs work. The internet is not perfect, but again, it's what do we bring into that? What is our responsibility? How are we leading those conversations online so that we can try and steer them in a positive direction that's going to lift people up, as opposed to sort of add to the division that exists as well?
Bang on. And one of the things I think most that I've had this realization of over time is it's all perception. Right, we all have our own perceptions of the experiences we've had, and they're not right or wrong, they're just ours. And if we're more accepting of that, then there is less conflict, because it's not about being right or wrong, right? It's having acceptance. But look, it's been great having you on today, Karl. I reckon we need to do a couple more of these, because my head's
do a whole day.
But if anyone does want to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Absolutely. They could visit our very out-of-date website that will be refreshed soon, which is www.
A broken down car, is it?
We're guilty of that currently, but the new website is very much in development. So www.moshi.com.au. You can email us at hello@moshi.com.au. The mobile business number is 0480 333 393. So please, like we do the professional work, but we believe in community and doing good and sharing a positive message. And we're always happy to have a coffee with anybody and have a conversation. If it leads to opportunity, great. If it leads to the ability to connect you with other people, great as well. So no, thank you very much for having me. And yes, we should definitely put a day aside and put 3 or 4 of these back to back as well.
All right, Karl from Moshi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here. And if you'd like to go and like and subscribe and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.